Newsfirst News Line with Faraz Shaukatali.
Very good morning to you. This is Newsline Live. We're broadcasting from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. The 27th of February will go down in history of independent Sri Lanka as one of the most dreadful days ever. And that is because on the 27th of February 2015, a fraud was committed, and 5 years later, there's still no resolution. 5 years later, that means 2 COPE committees, 2 parliaments, 3 prime ministers later. It is shocking that what the Attorney General described as the greatest fraud ever perpetrated on independent Sri Lanka is still unresolved. And as we mark this dreadful day in our country's contemporary history, I'd like to take you back to 5 years ago. And this is how we covered it 5 years ago.
Governor of the Central Bank, Arjuna Mahendran, says that he takes responsibility for not informing primary dealers regarding the latest Treasury bond issue of the Central Bank. Speaking exclusively to Newsfirst, the governor said that he agrees that there was a communication gap between the Central Bank and primary dealers on the bond issue.
Mr. Governor, now on the 26th, when you want to increase it up to 10 billion,
yes.
Was this communicated to the primary dealers?
This was not. So basically, we advertised 1 billion, and the Public Debt Department told me they would get something in the order of 1.5 billion. And when they informed me at that day that they had got 20 billion worth of orders, I then told them that, the government had indicated to me that they needed a large amount of money. And I told them, why don't we take half of that, 10 billion? And accordingly, the tender committee then went and chose, the lowest bids that they could get to generate that 10 billion.
But the problem right now, Mr. Governor, is the fact that this was not communicated to the primary dealers.
Well, it's in the past it wasn't either. The point is, how can we communicate that to primary dealers? Because we didn't know that we would get 20 billion worth of orders. The moment we opened the bids, we realized that there was much in excess of what we had originally anticipated in the auction.
But every time, Mr. Governor, there has been a treasury bond issue, there has been oversubscription, right?
Yes, but the point is, we don't. You see, my point is the knowledge that I had that the government needed the money was in the back of my mind, and my expectation was that we wouldn't have many bids at these auctions, so we were going to look at other means of raising it.
So, Mr. Governor, there is a problem that persists with regard to the communication.
I agree. I mean, it's because the functioning of the market has not been perfect in the past. Now, in this instance, I think that communication didn't work properly. We should have said we needed to raise 10 billion, but of course, we had advertised it the previous day, and I only got to know of the Treasury requirement on the Thursday. So there was miscommunication. I accept that.
So can this be called insider trading, Mr. Governor?
No, this is not insider trading at all, because, it was just a question of us shifting from one system to another.
One organization in question was privy to information that the others did not have.
No, that has to be established. Certainly that information didn't come from me.
Mr. Governor, many primary dealers have told newspapers on the grounds of anonymity that this has caused a confusion and instability in the market. And I think as a governor, you should take responsibility for it.
No, I will take responsibility for the fact that we should have advertised 10 billion, but we didn't have that information in time.
The governor of the Central Bank, Arjuna Mahendran, has now admitted to a breakdown in good governance. This is precisely what the previous government also did. The people involved in this are one and the same, or that is how it appears. Therefore, it is very simple. Arjuna Mahendran must step down. He must resign immediately.
Suddenly what the participating primary dealers and the banks came to know was that an amount of 10 billion plus has been concluded at a rate of interest of 12.75. So there are two issues here. One is, if the primary dealers participating knew that they are going to bid for an amount of 10 billion, and for a rate of 12.75, the approach would have been different. So there is a question mark at this point, because the participating people were not divulged the proper information for them to submit their bids. It is very important when such an accusation is made, and when there are personal factors coming in. I think the right course of action would have been for the governor of the central bank to step down for a moment. After all, it's not going to cause much difficulty to the country or to the central bank being away for for a very short time until this whole thing is cleared.
Meanwhile, speaking to News First, Mahesh Kalugampitiya, member of the three-member committee appointed by the Prime Minister to look into the Treasury bond issue, said that the committee members met this morning. Attorney at law Kalugampitiya said that they intend to question three members of the central bank regarding the bond controversy. Furthermore, political party representatives continue to criticize the latest bond issue of the central bank. What happened next? They're asking the rogue's mother for an explanation. Who appointed this committee? 3 lawyers from Sirikota attached to the United National Party have been appointed to this committee. It is clear that Ranil Wickremesinghe can now influence the members of this committee and make sure they act based on his whim. If there is an allegation against a state official, what do? We have to interdict him or her or transfer that individual in question.
ट्रांसफर කළා දාලා තමයි එතන ඒක වැඩි කරති. මෙතන මෙයාව තියාගෙන කේක් ගෙඩිය වගේ මෙයාව තියාගෙන කියනවා දැන් පරීක්ෂණ කරපළා කියලා. ජනතාවගේ ඇස් වලට වැලි ගහන්න හදන්නේ.
And who better than to have as a guest on the day that we mark the 5th anniversary of the by now infamous central bank bond scam, other than former banker and now retired, but a very vociferous activist, Mr. Rusripala Tennakoon. Very good morning to you, Mr. Rusripala.
Good morning, Faraz.
Really, 5 years ago?
Yes.
5 years ago?
Yes.
Listening to that clip of Arjuna Mahendran speaking to the director of English News at the time, Mr. Shamir Rasuddin, it is now absolutely clear. Mr. Mahendran says that it needs to be established whether this information had reached perpetual treasuries. We've had a presidential commission of inquiry looking into that, and they concluded without any uncertainty that indeed Arjuna Mahendran had acted ultra vires. He had acted in the interest of Perpetual Treasuries Limited. And Mr. Rusripala Tennakoon, it is shocking when somebody is caught out. It's caught and balled, isn't it, really? Arjuna Mahendran caught and balled by News First.
Yes. I think recalling this incident, you know, I have to mention a couple of things here. Actually, even at that time, we had the doubts whether the proper justice will be meted out in this case, because of the attempt made by those in authority to cover up things. I think you'll remember, Faraz, I wrote a book about this.
Actually, I was going to say that. This bond saga has given rise to so many things. For example, Sujiva Senasinghe deemed it fit to write a book to educate the public on the whole issue of bonds, because that's what he said he was doing. So he wrote a book. Then we had, there was another book, and then we had Mr. Rusripala Tennakoon also wrote a book, and most recently yet another book has been written. And but the definitive guide to the bond scam hasn't yet been written, and we'll take care of that one. But honestly, so they even went to the extent of that. And we mustn't forget the wannabe authors. The wannabe authors. they're also better known in terms of the central bank bond scam as the footnoters, the footnote club. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes, yes. And one book, the author withdrew the book from the market.
Indeed.
Yeah, later.
Yes.
Because he knew
yes.
it is becoming obsolete and it is becoming a pack of lies in the public, so he couldn't keep it in the market, so he had to withdraw it.
Indeed.
And you know, this clip that you played
reminds
me of a number of things. You know, that is the start of the beginning of the suspicion that we placed on the governor of the central bank in this whole issue.
Indeed.
Now, referring to the 27th incident, he said he was just trying to pass it on as saying that, you know, there was I agree that there was a communication gap.
Yeah.
It was not a communication gap. You know, it was a basic error of practice, wrong authority being used and wrong directions being given. So he is completely misrepresenting the thing to evade the responsibility falling on him. You know, it's not a question of communication. Why did he go and direct the officials to accept 10 billion? First he ordered them to asked them whether they could take 20 billion. That entire thing that was placed. Now he refers to in that clip, you know, we never thought that the market will raise so much of bids.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it now, what a silly statement that is. 15 billion out of that entire 20 came from his son-in-law's company.
Yeah.
So this is the market he is referring to.
Yeah.
I mean, he was trying to hoodwink from the beginning. Hoodwink from the beginning.
Did he do that because he knew that he had a virtual impunity by the fact that he was associated with Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister of
No,
Sri Lanka?
exactly. We have absolutely no doubts about that matter. When we recall the episode in the events that have taken place one after the other, you know, the responsibility, entire responsibility of the thing goes to Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, you know, beginning. On the 9th, 8th of January, the new government comes into power. On the 9th, Mr. Cabral, the ex-governor, resigns, tenders his resignation.
Yeah.
On the 12th, he holds a meeting of the officials, appoints his successor at the monetary board and resigns. And then on the 14th, just after Mr. Wickremesinghe announces the portfolios of the cabinet ministers, which strangely included the taking away of the central bank from the purview of the finance ministry.
For the first time in the history of Sri Lanka.
Bringing it under his control. Take these events, otherwise we will be called that we are just pointing our fingers at people unjustly.
Go ahead.
Now, the portfolio of the work of the central bank was taken out of the finance ministry purview and was taken under Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe's ministry, gazetted. Soon after the gazette came out, the son-in-law, Arjuna Aloysius, resigned from his directorate from the company Perpetual Treasuries.
Yes.
Before the appointment of the new governor. Then somewhere on the 15th or 16th, the news came that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe was going to appoint a Singaporean citizen as the governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. That was Arjuna Mahendran. There was chaos in the country. People raised all kinds of issues which today for us is justified beyond any level of
because we had Mr. Partali Champikaranawaka in the cabinet, Rajita Senaratne, and others who sort of complained and cast doubt, including the head of the cabinet, the newly appointed President Sirisena, who had received the mandate of the people.
Yeah, President Sirisena disliked it from the beginning.
Indeed, and quite rightly too.
and he was overridden by the, the obstinacy displayed by Mr. Wickramasinghe from the very beginning of this episode.
I'm told that he assured those present and assured those who raised concern that he will take care of any problem.
Far as you will recall, there are certain important events that, those stand as facts, this is not what conjectures.
Yeah.
He said once when this man was missing for some time, for a few days, in Parliament it was questioned by somebody, has he run away? No, he has gone for a wedding. I will see that he will come back. Now we are going to ask the question, is that same Mr. Wickramasinghe going to use his friendly influence on Arjuna Mahendran, promoting him to come back to Sri Lanka to face jurisdiction? No. So let the whole world understand, if they have any misconceptions in their minds about politicians in the country, they are in their own imagination attributing all kinds of honesty and integrity to various people, let them now come to the conclusion that they are wrong. It is not so. The events have proved beyond doubt that people in whom the country has had immense faith, thinking that they are honest, thinking that they are, immune to corruption, have not performed in that way. It was otherwise. So this is the lesson that the country should learn. This is the lesson that people should learn. They should not attribute qualities that are not deserved to be attributed to various people. It is the action that will prove, not the imagination of the people.
And of course, when Newsfirst started reporting on this, it was a complicated matter.
Yes.
I think that Newsfirst has broken it down into its simplest possible form, to the extent where the public at large are fully aware that there was some form of fraud at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. But, 5 years later, thank you for your messages, by the way. Do send your questions by SMS to 0772 300 305. You'll have a card up on the screen shortly. 0772 300 305 for your questions. Thank you.
Let me take a sip of your nice tea.
Yes, please do. It's quite nice.
Yes. Go ahead.
Now then, we want to remind. So there's a question here from somebody who's asking me to name all the authors. Well, I can name three, and I can't name the fourth because I can't remember it. But in no particular order: Sujiva Senasinghe, Rusiripala Tennakoon. The third one is the one I can't remember. It was written in Sinhalese.
Sinhalese, yes.
And try as I may, I can't remember the name. And the fourth one was a book written by the former governor, which is a compilation, Mr. Cabral.
Yes.
Mr. Ajit Niwad Cabral. So there you go. We're not hiding anything. It's all out there in the open. Excepting that I don't think that Mr. Senasinghe's book is available anymore. But if you want some copies, I've got a couple. I can let people have them. And I also have the copy of the Sinhalese book. There you go. Now then, Mr. Rusiripala, lie after lie after lie, cover up after cover up after cover up. Can I now ask you, we've even had a presidential commission. Mr. Gunasekara was the first to ask for an investigation. The speaker then was Chama Rajapaksa. He appointed a COPE committee under the chairmanship of Gunasekara. And one day, on the day that it was supposed to be handed over to the Parliament, this COPE report, lo and behold, I'm sure Mr. Wickramasinghe was able to engineer the dissolution of Parliament by chatting with his then friend, President Sirisena. And the rest, again, it's all history. It's 5 years old. But, Mr. Rusiripala, I want to say, I do hope people today, the official time, I think, of the bond to close was about 10:30 in the morning, and they gave an extension. So I reckon sometime about 10:50, 11 o'clock in the morning, it may well be opportune for us all to take at least a minute away from our lives and focus purely and simply on the greatest fraud ever perpetrated upon us, the people of Sri Lanka, the people of independent Sri Lanka. To remember that our legislators have done absolutely not much in having a resolution to the greatest scam ever perpetrated on independent Sri Lanka. I certainly will be observing a minute's silence at 11 o'clock because I want to remember what happened.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Rusipala, what do you think? What are the chances of recovery?
You see, from the very beginning, we knew that a huge attempt was being made using every bit of authority that they had to suppress this matter. You know, but the appointment of a committee to evade the further investigations, independent investigations, the evading of a no confidence motion that came in the order book of the parliament against the...
What do you mean the evading? How did they evade?
The action of the Prime Minister, the government. They prevented. The Speaker who was to take up that motion, you know, he said, no, it is better to appoint a COPE committee instead of taking that motion for discussion. They did not want to take that this one. They dispelled it that way. Then the COPE committee, first COPE committee came, with great appreciation to respect of honor to Honorable Div Gunasekara, who did a tremendous task in trying to, you know, reach a subject or approach a subject which was completely Greek to him and everybody else at that time. He got the expertise of people like Dr. W. Vijayawardena to tell the parliamentarians what a bond was. Because the Prime Minister himself has told in Parliament, what do you know about the bonds? You know about James Bond. This is what he said. So he knew when they planned this affair, you know, the script you played, the piece, it says that there was a need for the government for funds, extra funds. Now, how did they establish that point? By getting 2 ministers and the chairman of the UNP to come to the Syrian Central Bank on the previous day and to discuss with the governor the urgent need for funds in addition to what has been claimed by the Treasury on the usual basis. Now, the Treasury sends every month the monthly requirements for the next month for the central bank to make good, to make it available. Over and above that, they created a need and a necessity for extra funds to the cost that was announced was, the reason that was given was that they had to pay the contractors some money. You know, contractors, contracts that were awarded by the previous government. And who came for that meeting? Who came for that meeting? The Finance Minister, Ravi Karunanayaka, Kabir Hashim, Minister in charge of Highways, and Malik Samaravikrama, holding no position other than being a close confidant of the then Prime Minister and also the chairman of the UNP. I mean, these are, when you recall these Faras, this whole episode shows that it was a masterminded thing.
To me, this whole episode shows one really important thing, apart from the money and the departure from due process and so on and so forth. But there's one fundamental thing that comes out of this, and it is that it is more than time for Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe to step down and be moved out as the leader of the United National Party, because it is he who virtually single-handedly, with his mates, some of whom you've just mentioned, who has ruined the image of the party. And it's about time that in the wider interest of democracy in Sri Lanka, that the UNP rids itself.
All the more, Faras, let me interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. All the more for the reason that he decided it was necessary to dissolve the government before the COPE report came out, shows how bad it could have been for the election then, for the UNP, if the COPE report came out. What did they do? They stopped the COPE report coming out by getting Sujiva Serasinghe to file an action in the Supreme Court, which he later withdrew. Just to prevent Mr. Devagunasekara's report coming out.
I'm not sure that it was in the Supreme Court.
In some
court,
jurisdiction, you know, but finally it was withdrawn.
It was.
It was withdrawn.
It was withdrawn because that document would have then become public.
But by virtue of the fact that they filed a case, it became a public document.
Indeed.
Utterly idiotic, a silly move. And then you see, that shows that this incident was a very bad black mark for the entire UNP.
Indeed, and and yet even to this day, one person is holding up that the sort of reformation and the restoration of the integrity of the United National Party by stepping off the leadership and handing it to people who are not tainted, and that's very important, especially when we at a time at a sort of political crossroads where we need a robust other side, if you like. We need Parliament to be as strong as possible, and that can only happen with somebody who is demonstrating solid leadership. And it's a pity that Mr. Wickremesinghe cannot see the passion amongst his followers of his party.
For us, these manipulations that we were talking of go beyond any level of imagination. You know, this commission report said, under section 56A of the Registered Stock and Securities Ordinance, this becomes a criminal offence. You know what the government, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe's government wanted to do? At one stage they moved an amendment to take away the criminal aspect of this thing and call it a civil action, to make it fall within the civil side. You know, by paying the money back, you can get over it. These are the things, manifest maneuvers that they did. And you know, for the first time, when the commission called for witnesses to come and give evidence, one witness was given the questionnaire in advance. One witness was given the questions in advance for him to write down an essay and bring it and produce before the commission.
As Mr. Rusipal is making a bit light of this, but under the law, there is provision for them to do that, and they did write to the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, and he was expected to reply, and he did by way of an affidavit. But the point Mr. Rusipal is making is that Ranil Wickremesinghe, the minister in charge of the central bank, and also happened to be the Prime Minister, was treated with, shall we say, kid gloves. That's the point you're making, isn't it?
No, the Attorney General was not today's Attorney General who made a valiant effort to bring this thing to light that time as the prosecutor was never allowed to cross-examine.
Indeed.
That is the point that I'm saying. It was a differential treatment.
He wasn't, but they got the then Attorney General to ask some questions.
Yeah. It was not the normal cross-examination that the others underwent.
That's true.
That is
Ravi Karunaker was on his feet for about 6 hours.
Yes, of course. So therefore, these things and the comments made by the committee, the commission, you know, very categorically stating about the appointment of the foreigner. Then about the directive that was given, which did not become an effective, lawful, legal application in terms of the monetary board regulations in the central bank. You know, it was never adopted by the monetary board. The directive given by the then Prime Minister, the minister in charge of the central bank, to Governor Arjuna Mahendran, to deviate from the practice of direct placement and treat everything that comes in the form of an auction as the bids and to offer them, was a wrong decision. The judges themselves in the commission commented on it.
Now then, we got several questions here. One I think is very good. Well, actually, I'm just looking at it. It's several of them, it's the same sort of question. And this is it. This bond scam was perpetrated in the previous government. And the people who joined the public in highlighting this and, shouting about it are now in power. So why the inaction on the part of the Rajapakses?
You see, I don't go by what the people say or what we imagine that could have happened. Now there is a forensic audit report that has come out.
Yes, but that's just something that the Presidential Commission of Inquiry wanted.
Yeah. No, but let us...
As Sunil Handuneti says,
yes,
there is enough more of evidence.
Yeah.
And a prosecution must now be brought in.
I don't know. If the forensic audit report can pinpointedly say these violations and deviations were observed in the bond issue of bonds during Arjuna Mahendran's time, but they do not refer in the same way to the previous era, what does that mean for us? What do you expect a forensic...
I am troubled by the forensic audit trying to mix the two. There are valid arguments about the pre-2015
yes.
Administration
yes.
too.
Yes.
But there are two things here.
Yeah.
If we try and fight both the fires, we're getting nowhere, and that is what's happening at the moment. There is hardly any progress. We had a time when Arjuna Aloysius was regularly trotted out before the Fort Magistrates and so on, but since he's had bail, we can see less frequent appearances in court. Maybe behind the scenes they're trying to figure out where Arjuna Mahendran is. But honestly, Mr. Rispala, does it matter where he is? Why can't we have a case brought against him with the bulk of evidence already in place? Why can't they do a prosecution minus the man?
I mean, this is a question. This is a question that intrigues me too, Faras.
Yeah.
Why justice is delayed? Why action is not pursued in the speed with which we expect it to take place? I mean, all those are intriguing questions. I don't know why.
I wonder if Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe will say under oath, whether he has met Arjuna Mahendran from the day that after he last left Sri Lanka up to now, whether Mr. Wickremesinghe has met him anywhere. I'd like to ask him that, actually, whether he's prepared under oath to give us a statement.
He's the best to answer that. You and I can't do that.
No, that's true.
Yes. But then, coming back to this forensic audit thing, my own thinking about the forensic audit report is, having read the 5 volumes, having wasted a lot of time on that, I find that it is a device, if, as claimed by Mr. Sunil Handuneti, I greatest respect for what he has done in his capacity as the chairman of the COAP, but if this is used as an instrument to file action or as evidence before a court of law, and if it is the main source of evidence for that to build up such a case, I am sure that it will be thrown out on the first day it is taken up by the courts. Because this is faulty, this is deficient, it is wanting in so many things. The report itself admits that. Therefore, it appears to me, pardon me, as a ruse to confuse affairs further, as it was done right throughout the episode during the last 5 years. If they really wanted to investigate into happenings in the past, during Cabral's time, Mr. Cabral's time, and during Mahinda Rajapaksa's government, they had ample time to do that. 4.5 years.
But the same thing's happening. You see, and this is it. In the last few days, Newsfirst has covered this aspect.
Yes.
That, the common denominator is the corruption, is the departure from due process. And the common denominator is that the public are the ones at the receiving end. Whether it is whichever government, the same thing is happening now, Mr. Ruzipala.
Yeah.
We are not having, why is it, what is the problem? Dapula Dilivera, please tell the world, tell Sri Lanka, why are you not taking action against Arjuna Mahendran, the man that Newsfirst first, on the 1st of March 2015, asked to be removed out? Please take action against him. He doesn't have to be here. They can identify his assets and go after them.
Ex parte.
Ex parte, that is the whole thing.
Yeah.
When the DEA in the United States starts investigating people, they identify the assets right at the beginning.
Yes, and
so
this is a financial crime.
Indeed.
A financial crime. They have every right to, you know, take his assets. Of course, if it is a Sri Lankan, his civic rights should have been taken out. But in this case, you can't do that.
No.
He is a foreigner. That is why he was chosen. He was chosen to perpetrate this huge scam.
But who chose him?
Obviously, the man who appointed him.
Mr. Sirisena?
No, he only signed the letter.
Right.
He very clearly stated even afterwards that he did not want to reappoint him. He in the first, at that moment of time,
but who appointed him?
he was nominated and recommended by the Prime Minister himself,
Ranil
Wickremesinghe, to his own ministry.
To a ministry that, for the, you know, we need to understand this, that this is the first time that they took away the central bank away from the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah.
That is where it's always been.
Yeah.
All the acts, the statutes and so on refer to the central bank being under the purview of the Ministry of Finance.
Far as the Commission goes on to say about the appointment, it's not the question of legality or ethics or anything. It is a judgment, a rule of a basic judgment error that was made in that appointment. The committee says so.
Why is there a deep sense of pessimism, as evidenced by this message? Governments between SLPP and UNP will change, and we will have another show like this on the 10th anniversary, and no action would have been taken.
Far as there is a lot of dissatisfaction, he is quite right. That Weaver is quite right. There is a lot of dissatisfaction being expressed by religious leaders, by various other important independent people in the country about what is going to happen in the immediate future. Whether we will have the same set in the operation on stage and having the same show. This is a fear, this is a conjecture that is vast spreading in the society today. I have had the opportunity of meeting some people, religious dignitaries, you know, at times. They have expressed total dissatisfaction about what is happening and what is going to happen.
I want to say a few words about this whole bond scam and the fact that we are even today. The fact that Newsfirst has been reporting this for minimum 5 years, and when we first called on the 1st of March 2015, we said Arjuna Mahendran must go. That is what we said. But in all of this, later it turned out that there is actually a hero. To be more precise, there is a heroine at play. And that's true, isn't it? There's always a strong woman behind everything. And that lady was Mrs. Deepa Seneviratne. She worked in the public debt department. She was transferred in there, although she didn't want to be, because she didn't have enough experience. But Mr. Mahendran insisted. And it is Deepa Seneviratne who stood up to the governor of the central bank and said, no, we can't take 20 billion. And it is then that he said, oh, well, in that case, take half of that.
Having gone through the list.
Having gone through the list. Mrs. Seneviratne, to her lasting credit, and she did a huge favor by the country, which will be always remembered. She said no, and what's more, she wrote it down on the piece of paper, which then turned out to be a most invaluable piece of paper, far more valuable than that letter produced by Mr. Mahendran at some point, and he said it was kept under custody in his safe deposit box, probably in Flower Road. What absolute tosh. That letter that Mahendran referred to had no date, had no reference, had nothing. It was just happened to be written on ministry note paper.
Whereas, if I'm not mistaken, it is the statement of this Mrs. Senaviratne that made Mr. Wickramasinghe make in that statement to the Parliament on the 17th of March, admit that he gave the directive to Arjuna Mahendran.
Indeed. The Prime Minister said he insisted on the change.
He insisted.
And later on in court, he, with his very lukewarm cross-examination, he said that he didn't expect Mr. Mahendran to break any rules. So it's obviously an admission, therefore, that Mr. Mahendran did break the rules.
Did break the rules.
The world according to Ranil Wickramasinghe.
Quite so. Quite so.
Now then, News First has gone on and on about this, and I was just talking back in the back room there. We've had people who've been putting makeup onto our guests every time they come and talk about the bond. And a lot of hard work has gone into all of this. People in the newsroom, people in the MCR and department, people behind me in the control room for this studio.
Back room.
The back room, the makeup people, Sonu and his team. There's so many people, so many people. And they've all done a grand job because they all have a passion to represent the people's interests in whichever way they can.
And not to forget the valuable airtime that your channel has.
I was coming to that.
Devoted to this.
And I don't know what the shareholders say, but the operations people at the group have spent so much of time, energy, money on covering this very invaluable information put out to the public so that they can know what their elected legislators are doing. And because we are in sort of nearly election mode, please think about it before you cast your vote, because you cast your vote in the same old way you've done in the past, you're going to get a bunch of monkeys. Because, and by the way, the amounts of monies they've robbed, that they've managed to take it out, well, it's not peanuts, and they shouldn't be monkeys, but that is what has been happening. And so think, and think again. Vote very carefully, because this is just one scam. There are many others.
So many.
Sri Lankan Airlines, the Airbus chapter, pre-Airbus chapter, post-Airbus chapter, right? Then we had the Central Expressway, 104 million United States dollars squandered because they couldn't get the financing and their whole project together. They tried to appoint a company that's tainted by corruption, tainted by the Japanese authorities for operating within a cartel. And when they cancelled that, we had to pay the insurance premium. Lost forever. $104 million American. And there are several cases like that. The coal, Norchole, Sri Lankan Airlines, highways. The list is endless.
And what is going on unnoticed in the SOEs today?
Absolutely.
Including the state banks.
And that's it. That's it for Newsline today. I'm too overwhelmed by this whole thing to go on. We must finish. Think, and think again. And around 11 o'clock, why don't you take some time out, just 1 minute, and think what's happened to your country. That's the way it was on Newsline. Take care, and God bless.
News First News Line with Faraz Shaukat Ali.